Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Business Innovators Radio. This is your host, Constant Taylor. Today, we have a very special guest on the show, and they're going to share some very exciting information with us. So, if you're looking to increase your personal and professional effectiveness, then you've come to the right place. Our special guest today is Dr. Thomas Connell, aka Dr. Culture. Dr. Culture has been speaking professionally for over 20 years. The content that he primarily covers is cross-cultural speaking, training Americans to work with internationals, training internationals to work with Americans, and training allied military. Dr. Culture has spoken both nationally and internationally and is based out of West Palm Beach, Florida. Dr. Culture has a book coming out called Dr. Culture Unlocks the Secrets of American Culture, Not for Internationals Only. Dr. Culture, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks for joining. I know you're a busy man, so I'll jump right into first question. Could you please share with our listeners exactly what it is you do and how you help professionals and organizations?
Well, essentially, I train Americans, as you mentioned, on working in different cultures with people from different parts of the world. Americans are very new to this, generally speaking. And that number is reflected by the very simple percentage of Americans that have a passport, which is stunningly low. The figure is just around 34% of Americans that have a passport. And there's a percentage of them that don't use it. So it's I often joke, we Americans, we don't get out much. So as a result, when the American suddenly gets a phone call from HR and says, hey, congratulations, you've taken over the program in Bogota, Colombia, and you leave next week. Good luck. Well, there is a real difficulty involved in that because most Americans have never had to work in a different culture, often in a different language, and still they're expected to meet and exceed all standards, and it can be entirely debilitating. And there are horror stories in the cross-cultural world where people think, I'll just get down there, I'm a fair-haired boy, I'm a superstar of the organization up here in Poughkeepsie, and then they end up out of the U.S. somewhere and they just fall on their face, and it costs the company thousands, if not millions, to recover. And in the sense they don't actually. So I am in between these dynamic forces, and I train using a program style which I call cultural kung fu. That's with a K.
Okay.
In which I explain why the other culture acts, thinks, and behaves the way it does. And I compare and contrast that to the overall American cultural structure and why we feel and act the way we do, generally speaking. And for the Americans, there is no more powerful cultural component than individualism and personal freedom. It is so deeply ingrained in us that many Americans, unless they travel, they think that that's pretty much the way it is everywhere, and it's not. And it will really articulate itself very powerfully in these cultures where we don't need no stinking individualism. So it becomes a real challenge sometimes.
Well, I actually spent some time working and living in China. I was over there for 6 months, and I remember the first time that I went over there, the only thing I had was a book that I purchased on, dealing with the Chinese culture, but it would have been very valuable to have someone of your skill set to, not just for myself, but for other we called them transplants that were going over there for the first time, and how to actually interact with the culture and that sort of thing. So it sounds like you've got a very beneficial business and provide a very beneficial service.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And here is the warning to all. There is no person who can credibly stand up and say, I am an expert on all cultures everywhere and everything on planet Earth. That just doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And my particular expertise is with the American culture and how it will articulate in different regions. But I also have 312 people that are subject matter experts. Honest to God, these people are drop-dead authorities on almost every place in the world. And within those places, those countries, those regions, they may have additional expert status in regards to, economics, social stuff, insurgency, any of those things. So what that gives me is a tremendous leverage that allows me to very, very specifically target what the client needs, and then provide some pain relief, essentially. And if I can't do it credibly, then I call on my if you will, my stable of experts, and they're wonderful.
Now let's step back for a moment. I'm very curious to know how you actually, because it's a very unique skill set and a very specific niche that you're in. How did you make the transition to where you are, and where were you before that?
Yeah, well, first you have to be a spotted dog, and that's essentially what has happened here to me. I had greatness thrust on me many years ago. I was in the military. The last 10 years, I was in the Air Force, and the last 10 years of my career, I spent with Air Force Special Operations. And I was given that opportunity to put together a training program for Special Forces people who were busy training others and busy training others, other friendly militaries. And as a result, that's how I ended up doing what I do.
Okay. And
it sounds like I was rambling there a bit, but at that time, we were having tremendous difficulties with our people training internationals, because they were training them as if they were Americans or pseudo-Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't work that way. Just doesn't work that way.
So, not giving names, but could you describe the type of clientele that you have and the type of customers that you target?
Sure. Well, if you are involved in any kind of international business sales, any kind of international program management, I would be incredibly helpful, I'm almost certain, to any of those types of businesses.
Okay.
And that would be either within the government or within the private sector, the international business world.
Okay. And what comes to mind for me is defense contractors, federal contractors, prime, and I guess the sub tiers as well. Okay. All right. Excellent. Now let's talk about your book that's coming out, that you've got coming out soon. What's the content of that book, and what can the readers get out of it?
Well, essentially, it talks about how the Americans became who they are, and then how that cultural structure developed, and then from there, across the generations, in response to certain historical things, we ended up with the present-day culture that we have right now.
Now, the book is called Dr. Culture Unlocks the Secret of American Culture, Not for Internationals. That's a very interesting subtitle. Why did?
Yeah,
why
that's not for internationals only.
only? Okay,
Hold
not
on.
for international.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what I have done, and the reason I put in there not for internationals only, is because many Americans who have read this or they've sat through our training and such, they go, "Wow, I didn't know that. Well, that explains that." Or, "I wish I had known that back when I was in China or Vietnam or wherever."
Now, when will that book be coming out?
December.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Now, what adversity have you experienced in your career, and how have you overcome that?
Well, the biggest adversity has been depending on. Let me say, the biggest adversity probably would be the economics of today's business world, and dealing with the economic ebb and flows, and that's always difficult in the speaking business.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So now, if the listeners would like to get in contact with you and learn more about the services that you provide, how can they do that?
Very, very easy. They go to my website, www.drculture.com. That would be DRCULTURE.com. They'll find everything they need to know about contacting me, and I would be delighted to speak with any of them. Also, what we didn't have a chance to discuss was that I also produce and publish a online subscription newsletter, which is written for internationals in the U.S., international students, international politicians, military, everybody that are here in the U.S., like either under an assignment or something. And it's 18, 20-page product every month. It comes out explaining different components of the American culture and what's going on in the United States that month and why that's important to the Americans and so on and so on. And it also includes a link to Dr. Culture Radio, which is I call it radio you can see, because you click on it, it takes you to a screen on your computer, and it's an HD, if you will, television product. So we've received tremendous response from that, particularly the July issue, because I talk a lot about 4th of July and the backstory and with the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution and such. It's very, very interesting.
Okay, excellent. Well, in these last 30 seconds, is there anything that you would like to, a message that you would like to leave the audience with?
Well, I'd like to say that, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to speak to your audience. And, but secondly, understand that in the international world, nothing is what it seems to be. There's got to be a tolerance for ambiguity, and there will be those things that you will never, ever adjust to. You just won't. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you can't handle it, and that's normal. And when I'm speaking to groups, I explain why. And the issue of individualism is a big part of that. So, don't think badly of yourself because you're having difficulty in dealing with internationals. It could be just a situation that the international you're dealing with, maybe you have a problem with the guy. The guy just may be a jerk. I mean, they're a jerk in every culture. Personality does play a part in this.
Mm-hmm.
So, with knowledge, a little bit of knowledge is a very powerful tool in the cross-cultural world. And you want to have as much as possible, but a little bit of knowledge will completely separate you from the other Americans out there in that feeding frenzy, particularly in China. You've got all these companies that are just like thrashing about, going for the big bucks in China and all that. And if you show yourself to be culturally competent, that's not sensitive, but culturally competent, then you immediately identify yourself in a very subtle manner, which they appreciate. You identify yourself to be very different than all these others.
Well, Dr. Coulter, we really appreciate you coming on the show. That was very fascinating information that you shared with our listeners.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been great speaking to you. I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.